Okay, everybody, good morning. I won't say I'm surprised, but I just love to see how many of you are out here today, and I'm realizing the music is still playing. So would someone mind just putting a pause on that? Perfect. Well, it's early in the morning, so I can excuse that, but thank you all for coming out. I won't say we're surprised because we love Scott, but it is wonderful to see so many of you coming out this morning. Welcome to the Greer Heritage Museum. If you haven't been here before, literally what we do all year round is just talk about local history. So if that's your thing, you're in the right place. Now, a few things. Number one, we have coffee and donuts, and if you want to go and get some, I don't think we'll mind, so feel free. I think we should have plenty up there. The other thing I want to mention, we are going to have a book signing with Scott's new book, and that will be right after this presentation right here. If you haven't already purchased the book, it's available for sale right up at our front table. It's $25 plus a little bit of tax. So right up there you can get your book and then sign it here after the presentation. Well, I think many of you already know Scott, but I want to give you a short introduction on who he is and his newest book. He's a retired educator and park ranger, and he now teaches classes at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute over at Furman. He's active in local history groups, and he's a volunteer here at the Greer Heritage Museum. And of course, I think you all know, he is the author of a brand new book, The Superhighway in Upstate South Carolina. I volunteer here at the museum as well. For a long time, I volunteered all day every Thursday, and Scott was my partner on Thursday mornings, and just seeing him research and hunt down photos, I know he's deeply passionate about the area and its history. So will you please join me in welcoming Scott Withrow?
Well, it's good to be here, and I want to recognize a few people. Donald Jones came in today with StarTech's Tuckapaw Foundation. I want to recognize Hilda. Your last name, Hilda? Morrow, that's right, yeah. With Pacific...
Days at Pacific Mills.
Days at Pacific Mills Facebook page, yes. And Steve Hawkins was really a big help with researching the PNN Railway. And my brother-in-law, Lemuel Dillard, is here. My late wife, Ann, and the Dillard family were really helpful, especially on Peach history when I was writing about the superhighway. I'm going to start out with a little quiz here first. To test your knowledge of the superhighway. I've had to learn some of this myself, in researching. Where is Truckers Hill on the superhighway? Truckers Hill.
D&D Ford.
You're D&D Ford, yeah, going toward Spartanburg, going out beyond what is that now? Tipsy Taco and the Appalach Road, going down the big hill there.
Tab's Flea Market.
That Tab's Flea Market used to be there, right? Yeah. Who knows where Frohawk Mountain is? That's a harder one.
What'd you say?
Frohawk.
Is that near Appalachia?
Up a little ways from Appalach. Have you heard of Burgess Hills?
Yeah.
Okay, it became known as Burgess Hills, and today I think it's Mount Vernon Estates. Once called Peel Hill because a lot of doctors and families live there. John Frohawk was a surveyor from North Carolina when Governor Tryon was surveying the boundary line between the Cherokee and the settlers, and still have Frohawk Creek there. It's been changed to sound like Frohawk, which sounds like the combination between a fro, which is a tool, and a tomahawk or something. But actually it was named after a commissioner on surveying this boundary line back in the mid, I think 1760s or before, the Frohawk Creek and the boundary line. Who knows where Lick Creek is? You know where Chick Springs is. That was there was a deer lick there. That's Lick Creek coming under the superhighway there. I've been back there in the past, walked back, and that's a huge culvert and they had to fill in that to get the superhighway across there. But they have the pipe, the culvert, so that the stream can still flow through Lick Creek. Who knows where the Great White Way was? Thanks to Richard Sawyer of Greenville, he's not here today. The area from the old Sears building in Greenville, that was near the beginning of the superhighway. There, beyond there, the superhighway service station, which is at Bennett Street and Highway 29, that was the beginning of the superhighway. That part was lit up, maybe on toward Bob Jones University. A lot of lighting for that time period when the highway was first built. So it's called the Great White Way because of all the lighting. I guess they borrowed a little phrase there from New York City, huh? Great White Way. Where's W.O. Eazell Boulevard? Spartanburg, yeah. Walter Orlando Eazell was a member of a men's garden club who helped beautify that road. I rode by there a couple of springs ago. There's still daffodils growing on the side of the highway there. Maybe he was responsible for that. And there's some crepe myrtle trees there. Some of them once provided by James F. Burns, and those crepe myrtles are still growing. I don't know if they are the original ones there, but they're crepe myrtles along that area. Who knows where Clevedale is or was?
Fair Forest, Clevedale?
Pardon?
Fair Forest, Clevedale?
Yes. And what, Rosemary?
That's what.
Yes, same thing. Yeah. The Cleveland family were a prominent family in Spartanburg, and they had a summer home out not far off of where the superhighway is outside of Spartanburg, this side. The home is still there. It's now, I think, a bed and breakfast. And but that area was called Clevedale after the Cleveland family. Who knows where the Fork restaurant was? If you know where Poinsett Street comes into the superhighway, it was there at the Fork. Although I think it was named after a eating utensil, really, because it had a location in downtown Greer before it ever moved out to that fork between Poinsett and the superhighway. So those are just some of the places. I didn't recognize Paul Green. Is Paul here today? He was coming. Paul was a police officer and also a firefighter in Greer, and he really has a bundle of information on Greer. So I want to thank Paul. I mentioned some other folks. I want to thank the museum here, Jonathan and David Lovegrove, and for the assistance. Okay. Some of you grew up with the superhighway. Some are just learning about it. I grew up in North Carolina. My wife, Ann, was from Greer. But I remember coming down to Greer with my family around 1955 just to ride on the superhighway. That was an experience. This was the widest, biggest, most beautiful highway, they said, in the area, in the whole area. Superhighways became popular then. And superhighways were supposed to be, wide, multiple lanes, safe as an airplane, they said. And somebody said, somewhere in Pennsylvania that it was so safe they didn't need any speed limits. Sometimes driving the superhighway here, I think some people might also think that. But no speed limits. Some of them had no access roads. It was truly a freeway. Not like this superhighway. We have all sorts of streets and roads coming into the superhighway, and a few traffic lights too. I talked to Tommy Hughes, other people. They tell me they could go from Greer to Greenville, and very few, if any, traffic lights when the superhighway was first built. People wanted to move onto the superhighway. And so you look at the old newspapers and you see houses advertised along the superhighway all along. And it's hard to find sometimes who the owner. You can look at the old directories, which some here and some in Greenville. But that was the superhighway. There was some humor too. We know it's a dangerous highway today at times. It's crowded, but there's some humor in the history too. One of my favorite stories is there was a man and his wife who had never driven on that highway. They were going to Spartanburg, and they were going on the two left lanes, one of the two left lanes to Spartanburg, and a highway patrol officer stopped them and said, "You're going the wrong way. You got over in the right lane, the right side, and go one of these two lanes all the way to Spartanburg, and you'll be safe." Well, they did exactly as he said, but they came back the same way, which would have been on their left coming back. But thankfully they were safe because the highway wasn't as crowded back then. Some of you remember maybe I-85 when it wasn't as crowded either. But what happened is that the Highway 29 became like a linear town with buildings popping up all along. It's sort of like the exit of an interstate, with restaurants and service stations. Highway 29 actually went from near Baltimore, Maryland to Pensacola, Florida, and went through Athens, Georgia area, and on down. And it was designated in 1926, and it was basically a north-south highway. So it was an odd-numbered highway. The highways going east to west were the even-numbered highways, like Highway 74, where I'm from in North Carolina. However, 29 going south at Spartanburg takes a little more westerly course, so it goes a little bit more west from Spartanburg to Greenville, still maybe southeast to southwest to Greenville. So that's a route of old 29 would have come right through Greer, right down what was known as Emma Street and Hill Street, which became Poinsett Street, and which had become by 1916 the National Highway, which went from Washington, D.C. to San Diego, California, coming right through Greer. That was became the old 29, and then the new 29 is the superhighway. The superhighway had to be cut. It did not follow the old roads like the National Highway and piece together the old roads. They had to be surveyed, timber had to be cut. It was a straight shot. It didn't curve like the old roads. So and they had to get the land from people, I guess through eminent domain, to build the road. I found an old newspaper article that said you should donate your land to the building of a superhighway because it's going to benefit you so much. You'll benefit. I guess it did help your real estate value. But there were farms, I found out, along the superhighway when it was first built. I saw an ad, too, about a farm for sale. I think it was 20-something acres. It had 2 branches on it. I think there was an old barn left there. And it was right down from Woodlawn Cemetery, which had just started then. And it was right about where Wade Hampton High School is and the Liberty Life building in that area. That was still a farm in the early 50s, I think. So you've got people, got real estate, you got people moving into the superhighway, but you have people moving away too when the businesses came. And then the subdivisions started. I've got a story here. I wrote about people who were buried along the superhighway. This lady, Eve Robertson, was from Sandy Flat, out from Greenville, and she moved into Taylor's. Her husband was Ben Robertson. He was the postmaster of Taylor's post office. And she grew daffodils. She was a daffodil hybridizer. She developed 16 new varieties of daffodils and internationally known. And I didn't know about her until the last few years. But they lived along the superhighway. They lived in a house, which is not there today. If you know where the what's the big steakhouse near the double bridges?
Texas Roadhouse.
Texas Roadhouse. Yeah, if you know where the Texas Roadhouse is, if you know where the Walmart is in Taylor's, it was there somewhere on the other side. I think there's an Aldi's there in that area. Her house was right there, and she grew daffodils. Well, they moved away. I don't think the house is there now anywhere. They moved away, and her husband or somebody dug up all those daffodils and moved them to a subdivision. And her daffodil garden is still growing today. But she was not 90-something years old, 96 or 97 when this picture was made with her daffodils. Her house, their house was called Daffodil. After the daffodils. So that's just one of the people along the superhighway. I want to show you another picture. I want to mention too the ridges along the superhighway. If you come up Trucker's Hill or come into Greer, you're going to see a lot of ridges sort of running north to south. Well, this highway cut across those ridges, so you had to have cuts through there, and at the bottom, the low part, you had to have fills, and they put a culvert or a pipe, over so the creeks could still run. So I never had noticed this so much until the last few years. There are a lot of rolling hills here in Greer and on the superhighway. And This is a picture of Frohawk Mount from Frohawk Mountain at night. Burgess Hills, as it's called. Okay, upside down. Okay. The moon should be up here.
Well, it was set the other time.
But this is a higher little hill than you think. If you go up there and look off, I'm looking east toward McDonald's and beyond. This is Burgess Hill, Frohawk Mountain. This is a real landmark. W.W. Burgess was a real estate person and a mill owner. He started the Burgess Charities, and he was responsible for the building of the first Shriners Hospital, if you know where it was, over in Greenville. And he always felt like Burgess Hills, or Frohawk Mountain here, should be a good place for a hospital or a school. So if he had had his way and it didn't move into housing, Greenville Tech could have been on Burgess Hills, and the Shriners Hospital could have been on Burgess Hills too. But it went into housing, and there was a peach orchard there many years ago too. Vern Smith's family had peach orchard there, and I've seen pictures of that orchard. There's some other people buried along the highway. You might know who this is.
Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Shoeless Joe Jackson. Well, some Greenvillians think he should be in the Hall of Fame. But he is buried at Woodlawn across from Red Lobster. I guess Red Lobster's still there. But if you find his grave, you know it's his because it's circled, and his wife, Katie Wynn Jackson, circled with bats usually and baseballs. When I first came to Greenville, I thought that he was probably buried over in West Greenville somewhere because he played baseball, with mill teams. But when he died, the Woodlawn Cemetery was the going thing, so he was buried there in that area, and this is his grave. Somebody else who is buried there, Albert Einstein. The Albert Einstein had a son who lived in Greenville. Hans Einstein worked for Clemson University and the Soil Conservation Service. He was studying erosion in the Enoree River. And he lived in Greenville. He lived on Randall Street, which is just off of Main Street in Greenville. And he had a young son, be the grandson of Albert Einstein, who died at 6 years old, Klaus. And he was approaching 6. He died of diphtheria. And that grave is at Woodlawn Cemetery. But Albert Einstein, when he came, would visit. Here he is with some professors from Furman University. He would visit Furman. And sometimes he would visit classes. And I read one article where one student back in the back raised his hand. Could you help me with trigonometry of Albert Einstein? And but he, I guess Albert Einstein, with all his genius, was sort of the absent-minded professor. He would visit his son, he said, and walk around Greenville and get so involved in looking, he would get lost, and his son would have to come after Albert Einstein. Well, there was another thing too that we don't see today about the highway. Somebody donated granite markers. This is not a really good photo. There's only one left I've been able to find. There were mile markers. And they started at the state line near Blacksburg, South Carolina on Highway 29 and went all the way to Greenville. And this one is left in Lyman, along the highway in Lyman. Yeah, this is the one, I think. So that's 43 miles from the state line. These were mile markers. You know, if somebody had a wreck, they could say that wreck was close to this mile marker. So it was directional. Another place people gave directions from, I was talking with somebody on that, is Color Jackson Furniture, which was a big furniture store. When we came down in 55 or whenever, I remember we stopped at Color Jackson Furniture Store. They advertised region-wide, and it was a landmark. People gave directions from Color Jackson Furniture. It's called Tuck and Howell today, and other offices are there in that same building. So that was a landmark. Tuck and Howell, they gave directions from. I don't know what happened to all the markers. I wish there were some others. I read there was one in the Blacksburg area between Gaffney and Blacksburg, but I drove that and I could never see it. But we've got this one here in Lyman. Of course, restaurants, drive-in movie theaters, and there's one person, especially I want to end with. Of course, we're talking about a cement highway, aren't we? You had expansion joints. You know what expansion joints are on the highway. The rhythmic sound you get when you ride across those. If cement highways, they were better than asphalt in some way. They lasted longer. Now, they didn't quite have the grip of an asphalt highway, but if they were built right, cement highways lasted much longer. And some of them had monolithic curbs. The curb itself was, there was no gap there, no place for water to seep in. And so this was the kind of highway we're talking about. But you had to have highway patrol on that highway. And one of the most legendary people I found was Ed Mabry. Does anybody remember? I know you remember him. He was quite a character. Is anybody descended from Ed Mabry before I talk about him?
I know his daughter.
Okay. Well, he was a legendary character. He was quite a character. I think he was a good person, a really good person. He was a highway patrolman in Greer. I've talked to people. He would call mothers and tell them their children were drag racing or driving too fast. And drag racing was part of Greer back then on the superhighway and on Highway 14 north of Greer. And he caught a lot of people, but he probably saved a lot of lives too. Sometimes he'd be chomping on a cigar, and friends, I've heard people say when he came by a friend's house, he would sometimes blow his siren. I don't think the regulations of the highway patrol will allow that today. It was a little loose back then. He hated the liquor runners and moonshine, which came down maybe from somewhere, and on the highway, maybe the dark corner. But he would chase them, and somebody one time wrecked. It was said near the double bridges. That's near the Texas Roadhouse. Goes over one bridge goes over the southern, and one goes over P&N. So the double bridges there, twin bridges, sometimes they call them. And they wrecked there. Evidently, the car wasn't hurt badly because, according to the story, Ed Mabry confiscated that moonshine car and made it his own and made it his patrol car. So I don't know who knew about that in Raleigh, in Columbia rather, or wherever. But I don't know if that story is true, but I've heard that story. So quite a few stories of people like that. Do you know who Rudolph Anderson was? He's buried at Woodlawn.
Pilots.
He was a U-2 pilot. He was the only casualty of the Cuban Missile Crisis. His U-2 plane was shot down. There is a replica of, not a replica, but another plane he flew in Cleveland Park.
F-86.
A what?
F-86.
F-86, right. I guess the U-2 is still secret, so they can't display one of those. But another person, I'm thinking of Bob Jones University now, Carl Blair. Carl Blair was a well-known artist in Greenville. And the amazing part, I talked with his daughter. The amazing part of that was Carl Blair was colorblind, and he was still an artist, a well-known artist in the upstate and Greenville. So those are just some of the people and places along the superhighway. Some of you have some experiences with the superhighway, and some of you have experiences, and you might have questions. So, what questions do you have? Yes.
The part of 29 that's designated the superhighway, how many miles is it long?
Well, it goes from Greenville to Spartanburg, and I've forgotten the exact mileage. How far is it from Greenville to Spartanburg? Is it close?
About 30 miles.
About 30 miles, I think. Yeah. Actually, it's a federally designated highway, 29, but it was built by the state of South Carolina, and it was going at the big booster of the highway was the Greenville Chamber of Commerce, and it was first going from Greenville to Taylor's. Well, then Spartanburg got in on it. They wanted part of this superhighway, so they boosters there started, and Greer and others. Not everybody was for it, but there were boosters, and then it was continued on. It started in 1936. I don't think I said that, and ended in 1946. The last section was built in Lyman, out from Lyman, and it was delayed by World War II. It would have been done quicker, but World War II delayed. It was 2 or 3 years there, or 4, that it was delayed. Who else has a question? Yes, sir. Then I'll get yours. Go ahead.
I've heard a lot of people talk about when it was actually paved. I know that it was a dirt 4-lane road for a long time. Did you ever run across anything about when it was paved?
Well, it was paved, I think, in sections, so there was some dirt, probably at first, before it was paved. I know when you got to Lyman, what was the grill there? The Super Grill in Lyman. You went on the old highway down. You showed me where the bus stop used to be there, Donald, along the old National Highway, which runs parallel. I think that was probably the east bound lane, and then you came back the 2 lanes up. Not all 4 lanes were there at first, so it split right there. There was a split in the highway.
The Super Grill was owned by my grandfather at one time.
Yeah, the Super Grill was owned by your grandfather. Yeah, right there. And they advertised air conditioning, didn't they? Some of the houses they advertised along the super highway, they advertised modern bathrooms. You know, how about that?
And it was 2 lanes for a long time, a dual lane, and then they added the 3rd lane.
Yeah, then the 3rd lane. They called it the dual lane for many years, yeah. Yeah, question.
Yeah, you talked about how there weren't the normal entrances and exits like we see on superhighways today. Did you just try to jump on and take your chances? Or there just wasn't enough traffic to worry about getting on?
I don't know how other superhighways worked. I know, you know, later the Autobahn in Germany, you know, I don't know how if there's any access to that
Yeah,
road.
that's what it is.
But here with this superhighway, of course, there were stop signs, traffic signs, and
Stop for this direction and then you just kept going if you were on the highway itself.
yes, I think so. It was never truly a superhighway like some of them were where you didn't have access. It was always streets and roads coming into the superhighway here.
Even as late as late 1970s. I know this is hard to imagine today, given the volume of traffic on the road. But would you believe there were only 3 lights from East Lee Road in Taylor's to Buncombe Road in Greer?
Only 3 lights
3
in.
lights. You had East Lee Road. No, East Lee Road. There was no light from East Lee Road to Buncombe Road. Excuse me, those would have been the only 2. That was nonstop, and all the crossroads were just stop signs, which I love, because you could roll up there, and if nothing was coming, you
Yeah,
didn't stop. You just went on
yeah,
across the
just
road.
went on. Yeah.
But
Wonder-
yeah, I'm 2 lights. So from East Lee Road to Buncombe Road, there was no other traffic light.
Wonder how many lights today.
I have no idea.
Rosemary.
My husband lived in Duncan,
Uh-huh.
and in 73, he took summer classes after high school at Greenville Tech in Greer. And he said he could drive from Duncan to Greenville Tech in Greenville, in 15 minutes.
In 15 minutes. Wow. Just think of that today.
No, Lynn, I was right. It was 3.
3.
Main Street and Taylor's where the fire department.
One more.
There was a red light there. So East Lee Road, the fire department, Buncombe Road. Those were the only 3 lights.
Only 3 lights. Yeah.
My first memory of it was going to Greenville with my daddy. Back when I was a little boy, we had to go to B.L. Bruce tractor place over there in Greenville. And I don't remember a red light all the way from Greer to Greenville.
None at all, yeah. And I talked to somebody, I think in the Scouts, maybe, who walked all the way to Greenville in the median, in the middle part, which was enough, I think, wider with more grass then at the time.
When we went to Greenville from Lyman, when we came back, we knew we were, on Superhighway. We knew, we topped the hill there, the one that goes to Duncan, coming into Lyman.
Mm-hmm.
We topped the hill, we could see the Pacific Mills sign over, and we were up so high
Yeah,
that we could see that sign, and
'Cause
we knew we were home.
you
it's a
knew you were
safe
home
feeling.
right there, a landmark,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a good feeling. I had a question back there.
New highway, super highway, super high tech at that time. Unlimited speed limits for issues of safety, accidents on the road. Nothing like today.
Yeah, well, there were accidents on this one, from the start. Remember, it was like an interstate. It went from near Baltimore to Pensacola, and you had people coming through from out of state, and they're going to need wrecker service. They're going to need mechanics. They're going to have to stop and eat, and they're going to, do motels. And what's interesting to me is when Interstate 85 was built, you know, what happened to those buildings? What happened to the motels? Some motels closed, some declined in quality, you know. And what's interesting to me is how buildings were repurposed. If you look at the Coca-Cola bottling plant in Spartanburg, it's now being used for something else. The Matador restaurant was, El Matador, was a residence and now a building. There was one Skyline Motel, which was, if you know where Josie's Chuck Wagon restaurant is, near, I guess, Fairview and 29, just going on the hill, going toward Greenville is Skyline Motel. It was visited by Duncan Hines, who recommended motels and restaurants in his book. The ones who made, I guess they named the cake mix or something after him later. But I wish I had taken a picture of that. That building stood a long time. It became it became Billy Bob's. It became Under the Moon. It became a lot of names, but they finally tore it down. But they repurposed that building. Maybe not always for great purposes, but they were repurposed anyway. And
You're talking about accidents.
yeah.
I grew up right on 29, really off of 29, and going down Truckers Hill below D&D, back in maybe late 50s, early 60s, there was transfer trailer trucks that had an accident down there.
Yeah.
Landed up in Atkinson's yard down there. One of them was a furniture truck, and the other one was a cattle truck.
Okay.
The cattle, they had to let the cattle out, those that didn't, the cows that didn't get killed, they roamed around our neighborhood for days.
Yeah.
For days, and then they sent out cattlemen on horses and then rounded them up, eventually getting around.
Right on the superhighway.
And then there used to be a salt station there now. Back then it was, they were filling up these tanks that was upright out. Gas tanks were not in the ground, they were up behind the station. Truck caught on fire. And I can remember standing across the road, and seeing that black smoke go up. They got the truck driver, they hosed him down to something, and he got in the truck, the gas tanker, and he pulled it away from the service station.
The service station.
So, that made WSBA news that night.
I bet it did, yeah. Bet it did.
Scott, there was a rock building right up at the end of Poinsett, I guess. It was across the highway, and it was a liquor store, but it was rock. Does anybody remember that? Well, my aunt and uncle, back in the 40s or earlier, 30s, they moved into the rock building. That was a little house, then.
Yeah.
And my aunt was there alone one night, and no anything on the windows, no screens or anything. And she was standing at the window, and a hand reached in and got her hand. They moved.
Yeah. I see why.
My grandmother passed in 1984, but anyway, she lived in Greer all her life.
Yeah.
The Baldwin family. She always called that the den of iniquity.
Yeah.
When we were little.
Really?
Every time we came out there, that's a den of iniquity. We had no idea what that meant. We were just saying, yes.
That turned into ABC store, didn't it?
Yeah,
A whole lot of cooks.
I wonder what did it start out as? Do you know?
I don't know. I just know when we got married, we moved in a house that Craig Taylor, anybody remember Craig Taylor?
Yeah.
Yeah, we bought a house from Craig Taylor, and the cooks lived next door to us who owned the liquor store.
Craig Taylor had a restaurant.
He did.
And I think he died, and his wife ran it. I think it was called Mrs. Craig's restaurant. Ma Craig's,
And
yeah.
then there was another, my parents used to call them honky tonks.
Yeah.
Your dad was a preacher,
He
right?
was.
That's what Billy Bob's and Under the Moon.
Next door to it, and And that service station there, that there was a gang called the Piedmont Boot Gang.
Yeah.
And it made a detective magazine because there was 2 people killed in that, murdered in that restaurant one Sunday. And the building's still there now. It's
There's a ski mask.
ski
gang,
masks. That's
too.
all wore ski masks.
Yeah, back at certain
Is that
times.
rock building still out there, the one I was talking about?
Oh, no, that's, it's, what's that, Ace Hardware now?
I can check.
There were a lot of rock buildings along then. I always wondered if they had the same builder or some. I know up in the Dark Corner area and on the Pittman family, I think, are good builders of stone structures and buildings. So I wondered if there's a nice old stone building across from Mr. Sauce's, if you know where that is, at St. Mark's Road. And it burned recently. But
That was a house.
yeah, it was a house. I talked with the people whose grandparents owned that. I did talk with somebody who lived there. I could never find anybody who remembered much the building of the highway. You know, somebody would be, I guess, maybe in their 90s today. I talked with a gentleman over at Lyman who was 4 or 5 years old. He's not much older than me, I guess, when they were building it. That last section, his family lived along the highway. And at 4 and 5 years old, the thing he remembers most is the big machinery. That would impress a 4 or 5 year old boy. So I wish I'd gotten started on this, 20 years ago. There'd be more people alive who remember the building of that highway. And I wish I'd photographed Billy Bob's or Under the Moon or some places like that too, that are gone now, those buildings, those historic buildings.
My dad went to Gardner Webb up in Bowling Springs.
Yeah.
And my granddad used to take my dad down to Hillcrest Drive at the bottom where Super Highway starts. And my dad would catch a ride every weekend back to Gardner Webb with a trucker or something.
Really?
People hitchhiked all the time.
People hitchhiked back then, yeah.
It was a lot safer back
Probably along the superhighway. Yeah, I grew up 7 miles from Gardner Webb. Know where that is.
I have a FYI comment. We were in a meeting on Thursday, and we revealed that the highway will be repaved from Target and Spartanburg to Lyman, starting this fall.
Probably needs it, but there'll be some disruption, won't it? A lot of disruption to the traveling. Well, I travel it almost every day, and some of you might also, if you're going to Greenville or Spartanburg or somewhere, you have to get on the superhighway.
It used to seem like, I don't know, when y'all were little, when you were on that highway from Greer to Greenville, it seemed like a long, long trip.
Yeah.
You felt like you were going 30 miles or something, it probably was about 5, 6, 7 miles. I don't know.
A lot of people travel, eat
Spartanburg
out.
was a long way.
Yeah, back then.
On Fridays, Friday afternoons, a bunch of Clemson guys would be standing at the Liberty Live, headed up our way and getting something,
Thumbing.
to get a ride home.
Yeah. That was a common thing, and safer back then, as you say. Yeah. How's the time, John?
I think you have about 10 minutes if you want it.
10 minutes. Who else has a question or a comment? Yeah.
I remember being a little girl in the 60s, and my granddad and grandmother would pick me up, and we would go to Howard Johnson's, which was where Red Lobster is now.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And we were coming off of North Main Street. I lived on Westmoreland Avenue. And I tell you what, it seemed like we were going to Texas. Howard Johnson's, which was up on that hill. It seemed like we were, and my grandmother would say, I hear you totally wrong, because it was forever, but I don't remember any red lights.
Yeah, but it seemed like a long ways anyway.
We died laughing, we used to go to Howard Johnson's with my parents sometimes, but anyway, I don't know if y'all remember, but the children's plates, they had nursery rhymes, names for them. One of them was a Humpty Dumpty salad, and my little sister thought she was so hot getting it. It was a huge bed of lettuce, one boiled egg. She didn't
And they had all the flavors of ice cream too, didn't they? Yeah. 28 flavors of ice cream.
I grew up in Tyler.
Yeah.
And we would come to Greer and cross the superhighway into town of Greer.
Uh-huh.
The only time we ever got to the superhighway and turned left towards Spartanburg was the few times in the summer that we went to the beach.
Went to the beach.
Because the interstate was no longer there, not there yet.
Yeah.
And so we'd cross the superhighway, but turning left and going any of that seemed like the end of the world. Nothing else.
Yeah, I bet so. Yeah, that's those days. Some of you went to Sears too. Sears Roebuck, as it was called then.
Only at Christmas.
Only at Christmas. I think when we rode the superhighway, we went to Sears that time. My dad wanted some good tools, so he got them at Sears Craftsman.
At Dairy.
And
Candy counter.
at Sears. Yeah.
And the escalator.
That's the first time I'd ever been on an escalator. Yeah.
My mother said that people took field trips, school classes took field trips to go to that Sears and ride.
To go where?
They took school field trips to that Sears building.
Oh, to Sears.
Right,
Just to ride the escalator. I like that.
Well, the Pet Dairy sat right across the street.
And the pet dairy was there. Yeah.
When I was 9 years old when I moved here from New York back in '74, and I noticed when New York got on the island, everything was surrounded on highways. Well, we moved here and we just saw Wade Hampton Boulevard, and there was hardly anything. It just drew our attention big time. And then I don't know if anybody here knows Flo's Big Scoop Ice Cream Parlor. They used to be across from the bowling alley. Mr. Flo and I worked there. And I watched across the street. We were wondering if it was a supermarket or what. It ended up being a bowling alley, in front of the bowling alley. And then all the growth. When did that start? It seemed like big growth started on Wade Hampton Boulevard. Like, the Walmart. I think it came in like 82, 83. Shopping center.
Yeah. I think there was a big spurt probably in the 60s and maybe 70s. Yeah, there was a mall there, Wade Hampton Mall, Carol's Record Shop. I talked to the owner, and that one. That building is still there, up from Henry's Smokehouse. It became a camera store, and it was a record shop. And the design of the building looks sort of like a piece of stylus or something, part of a phonograph record. If you look at that building real closely. But a lot of businesses have come and gone.
Yeah, that really shaped downtown Greer, I believe, because I think we saw that film on, it was Chamber of Commerce did on Greer.
Mm-hmm.
That was 1997, and it was the amount of businesses in downtown was so varied, it was amazing. Now you hardly see that because everybody goes to Wade Hampton.
Yeah.
To do their shop there.
Yeah, they were moving out to Wade Hampton then.
It's changed the character of downtown, but it's still thriving, but not like it used to be.
Well, I remember when the downtown Greenville declined and there wasn't a lot there, and it's come back in a different way now. But people were moving out to the superhighway to Wade Hampton there in that area.
The P&N Railroad ran right behind our back door almost. And we hopped on it to ride to Greer and Greenville. And then we'd come back to the depot, get off and walk back home. It's so neat. I remember those rides. I loved it.
Yeah.
Kids used to hot rides to piano lessons. My mother did. Like kids would get on it themselves and go to lessons.
Where did she live?
Southern Bleachery,
Yeah.
that area. Is that out there?
What's that what?
Is that over there? Is there?
My mother-in-law William's mother wrote about a lady who had appendicitis and went on the PNN. For some reason, they took her to the Spartanburg Hospital then, on the PNN, and a lady would come to Greer to the movies from the Lyman area, I think rode the PNN, and not a lot of expense for a movie and, all that back then. Well, I've enjoyed this, and thank you
Thanks, Scott.
for inviting me.
I will make just a few quick notes. Scott will be right here for a book signing, so make sure if you haven't already gotten your book, we still have more available right up there. I also want to thank those of you who, when you got your tickets, you checked that little extra box to do a $5 donation, and those of you who put cash in the little bin. We try our best to keep as many Greer Museum events free. We want to make this as open as possible to as many people as possible. So if you donated today, I just want to thank you. And then I finally just want to make a pitch for the museum. If you were like, I know some of you out here, and I know many of you have come back to the museum. If you love reminiscing and talking about the past and learning about history, that is what we do here all the time. So volunteer. You can just come, spend a shift. It's a 3-hour shift. You can read, you can learn, you can talk with folks. You can donate, you can just get involved because we do this 24/7, 365. So thank you all so much for coming. And one more time, let's thank Scott.